Secretary.
Thank you. I thank the gentlelady from North Carolina for pulling us together. You know, when you talk about issues that are women's issues, right now, national security is at the top of the heap. And as we have talked about soccer moms and Walmart moms and all these other iterations and descriptions during the years, right now we are looking at a category of security moms, because the issue of security is what mothers are talking about. And I appreciate so much the leadership of the gentlelady from North Carolina for pulling us together. And we have two other colleagues who are yet to join us, Ms. Ross-Leighton from Florida and Ms. Lummis from Wyoming, to talk about this issue. Coast to coast, this is what people are talking about, and they sit in disbelief at what this administration is doing, whether it is Iran, whether it is other foreign policy. Our friends and allies look at us, as the gentlelady from Alabama said, and they say, what are you doing, and where have you been, and what are you thinking? They got a thinking problem, as we would say in Nashville. Our enemies look at us and say, asleep at the wheel. This is our opportunity. That's exactly what Iran is doing. And they look at what we are doing to our military. And I thank the gentlelady from Alabama for talking about her love for Fort Rucker and the men and women there. And I know the gentlelady probably sits down with those in her district at Fort Rucker, like I do, with the families, with the leadership team, with the men and women in uniform at Fort Campbell, which is located in my district. And they are terribly concerned. They have a mission to fulfill. And it is despicable. It is despicable that this administration will continue to try to cut and cut and cut our military. Cut the numbers. Don't give them raises. Don't give them all the tools and training. Don't give them the flying hours program that they need for redeployment. Well, guess what, Madam Speaker? Every bit of that affects the effectiveness of our men and women in uniform. And I yield to the gentlelady from Alabama for just a moment to expand on the point of the cuts that are taking place at Fort Rucker and what that means to her constituents.
Sure. No, well, I appreciate the gentlelady and, you know, just the shared concern here that we have, you know, for our men and women in uniform, for our Army aviators, but for their families as well. If the sequester goes into full effect, not only when we're cutting from 12 cabs now, aviation brigades, combat aviation brigades, there to 10, there's a potential we could have to go to 9. So what that means directly for Rucker is we decrease our student load, the number of Army aviation pilots that we're training. But what that means for our country is that we're no longer ready. And I mean, you could make the argument that that in fact is the case now. They're going to do everything we ask them to do with what they have. We know that about the United States military, the best in the world. But absolutely, we are spreading them more and more thin to the point where we're fighting an enemy overseas right now, whether you want to call it war or not. It's happening, and our men and women are in harm's way. There are boots on the ground, and if these cuts move forward, they're going to suffer more. So I appreciate you drawing attention to Rucker, and I know that you feel as passionately about the military families.
I do indeed, and I thank the gentlelady for yielding back. And she makes a point that is so very important: the readiness and the ability to fight 21st century warfare on a lot of different fronts. And Madam Speaker, my colleagues and I will say part of that is naming and knowing your enemy. Radical Islamic extremist. That's the enemy. And that is one of the reasons that this deal that the President announced this morning is so terribly disturbing to us. His advisors had said that no deal is better than a bad deal. And guess what? What we saw on the from the president this morning is a pretty bad deal. Here's what Iran gets to keep in this deal: 5,060 centrifuges, and includes an 8-year limitation on uranium enrichment. Think about that, 8-year limitation. So then, are we setting a time certain that Iran can move forward? This is something that our constituents and the American people need to know about. And then you look at the other components of this, the IAEA not having the ability to just move forward and inspect anytime, anywhere, but having to give that 2-week notice. That is something, again, of tremendous concern. You know, the president has threatened to veto any legislation that impedes the nuclear deal. My hope is that Congress is going to stand up and that we will say no to the president in this deal, and we will say yes to increasing the security of this nation. With that, I yield back to the gentlelady from North Carolina.